moderator for this panel this year is not only the Director of Flight Projects at the NASA Ames Space Portal just around the corner here, well, more across the street, but he's also been a mentor for not only myself, but the other day managers in planning this conference. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Bruce Pittman to the floor. Bruce.
Thanks, Gary. So it's a true pleasure to have you all here today, to get a chance to share some of the experiences with you. I think we put together a really spectacular panel for to get their insights. Really wanted to give a couple of thank yous. One is to all the folks at NASA Ames that work so hard to put this together. Particularly, I'd like to give kudos to Mark Newfield, who's one of the unsung heroes behind the scenes here to make all of this this stuff work. Gary Martin has been, who's our boss up in the headquarters building, has been a great supporter of this effort. And as you know, working with the government isn't always the easiest thing to do. So I wanted to thank the Space Frontier Foundation for hanging in there with us. And you know, this whole idea of public-private partnerships can be a little challenging, but it can also, as you can see here, when it works, it can work really well. So we're really proud and honored to have you you folks here today. As Gary said, I you know, first came to this place in January of 1974 as a co-op student from UC Davis. And you know, back then the Apollo program had just ended and we didn't quite know what was next. So it's a kind of a similar time to where we are right now, that there was a lot of uncertainty and about where do we go, and we had just had the dark times. I was one of the first entry-level engineers that came to this place after the dark times at the end of the Apollo program. So I was one of the first entry-level engineers that were here and had some wonderful experiences with planetary exploration. My first job out of school was being the implant rep on Pioneer Venus at Hughes Aircraft Company down in Southern California. We were putting together a spacecraft to go to another planet, and I was 26 years old. You know, so this was great. So to NASA, I was the lowest of the low. I think I was a GS7, but to Hughes, I was the customer. So man, talk about a great place to be. Never worked harder, never had more fun. So in my years of doing this, you know, have learned some things, and that's kind of where this war stories idea came from. Is this idea of trying to share between generations, between people in different industries, kind of coming in and going out. I actually left civil service in '85, went out into the private sector, worked with some of these crazy people up here, worked with Tom Taylor on Space Hab and Kistler, and went off and did a bunch of other things, and then came back to the NASA fold as a contractor back in 2005. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I think we're going to see more of, is this not, you know, you go and you get one job and you keep it for 30 years and then you retire, get a gold watch and go play golf in Palm Beach, but this idea of having, you know, multiple careers, reinventing yourself, people coming into government, going out of government, and I think that provides, some new perspectives. I certainly got a much different perspective of working with the government when I was on one side wearing a NASA badge than I was when I was on the other side and we were trying to do this from the commercial side. So I think that's helped me in my career, having both of those perspectives here to do that. So, and then this idea of holding these conferences, I was thinking back, the first one of these that I did was in 1979. So 32 years ago, we did a thing in San Francisco. I was with the AIAA at the time. This was back long before the Space Frontier Foundation was even formed. It was a joint AIAA AAS conference, and it was called Back to the Future. And this was before the movie came out. So with all due respect to those folks that did a great movie, but we had this, and so it was the 10th anniversary of the first lunar landing, and that's where the Viking Fund was born. I don't know if those of you remember, we used to get these full-page ads that were donated from Mahoney magazine, and it showed the Viking lander with a tin cup with pencils, and it says, "Feed a starving robot." So that was born out of that conference. And so there is a thing about new organizations, new ideas being born out of this. I know several of the people The companies that are existing out there today have been born from conferences like this and other ones, Space Access Society, ISDC, and other conferences. So I think this is part of that sharing the wealth and getting people excited about new possibilities. So today we're going to talk about the past, and then tomorrow Esther Dyson we're going to do a future session that I'm going to participate in, where we're going to start talking about possibilities for tomorrow and how the future can be different from the past. So let me introduce my panel here today. We have, first up, we're going to have Sean Mahoney. He's with Masten Space Systems. He's the new guy. I don't know, how long have you been there, Sean? 7 months. So, but he comes with a variety of experiences, and these guys are going to kind of explain their own their experiences as we go along. Then we're going to have Jeff Manber. There's a man who certainly has had a lot of experience and is doing some really exciting things now that he's going to share with you. Then we've got over on the government side, we've got Jess Sponable here, our colleague from AFRL. Jess is a former blue suiter in the Air Force and was heavily involved in the DCX program, and he can talk to you about the good, the bad, and the ugly about that. Tom Taylor is a long time. Tom started out as a civil engineer on the North Slope of Alaska doing big construction projects, and then somehow insanity overtook him and he decided to go into aerospace when he had a real job, you know, doing real stuff, and he decided that space was the place. So Tom could share some of his ideas. And then Max Vozoff is another one of these person that was at JPL, had done, you know, space stuff, and that decided to go out and see what the commercial side was like. Went to SpaceX, worked with them for a number of years, and now he's got his own, I keep always forgetting the name of it. Yeah, Innovative Space Propulsion Systems, and he's going to tell you about some of the exciting things that they're doing. So on that note, let's go ahead and open it up, and you can either talk from there or you can come up here, whichever you want to do. Sean?
I'll speak from here is fine.
Okay.
That works. Good morning, everyone. I got to tell you, if you're thinking about starting a company, let me tell you, it's terrible. The hours, the pay, the stress, you really should not do it. If you have a job, yeah, pay's a different word. If you haven't left yet, I will tell you, it is all of those things. That is absolutely true, and it is also phenomenal. There is nothing quite like working with a company, even when it bombs. The fact that you actually have that opportunity to be out creating value. I'm relatively new to your industry. I'm the kind of guy who works in a number of emerging industries, and I was asked to join here today to talk about some of the things you can do to avoid getting in the way of the wonderful technology. It's almost criminal if you develop some great technology and your company dies for another reason. So I was going to just kind of offer a couple of thoughts of things that I've seen as I've worked in other industries with other startups, that if you're looking at coming out of the gate now, there's some things that you can do to help reduce the risk of failure right out of the gate. One of them, and this sounds counterintuitive, but don't quit your day job just yet. As soon as you quit that day job, all of the pressure of making sure everything's got to work, and it's got to work now, fold on to you. So I'm not saying hold on to that job forever, but keep working in parallel. Nights and weekends, you're going to be working anyway in a startup, so you might as well get used to doing that now. One of the other things that I've seen a lot of innovative people do, they've got a great solution, and so they think, well, I've got a better way to do it. The problem is they've got a better way to do everything. It is not necessary for you to invent a better way to do accounting and a better way to build a website and a better way and a better way and a better way. Pick the thing that you're going to innovate in. Pick the area where you're going to compete, and everything else, buy the stuff off the shelf. I'll tell you, the first $50 that you should spend, your own domain name, which will run you $10 a year, and a business card that you did not just print off. It will add credibility to, if someone hands me a business card that's slightly floppy, that has a Hotmail or a Gmail or, God forbid, an AOL address, it says to me, you're not serious. Eventually, I'm sure AOL addresses will become hip and be back in style, but not right now. If you hand me that card, what that says is I'm kind of just dabbling around the edges. To spend the $50 on a decent business card and your own domain name is a worthwhile investment. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to say, I took at least a little bit of time to say that I'm serious about these things that I want to do. A word about your friends. They're your friends now. And when you go into business with them, things change. I have had the pleasure and the unfortunate circumstance to work with people that have been friends and that the stress of the business has torn apart. Protect your investment and protect your friendship and have a prenup. I know you're talking about changing the world, and having a breakup conversation as you're changing the world sounds incongruous, but if you don't do it at the beginning, then you have to fight about how to break up while you're in the middle of a fight. And you can't resolve that. The simple buy-sell agreement, it's a relatively standard kind of thing. Take 10 minutes and get it done. On the opposite end of that prep work, you don't have to spend a million years trying to craft the perfect agreement. There's plenty of things that are kind of templates. You can certainly use those. So there's one other person besides that partner that you've got in business that is really important in the startup. And please, some people believe, oh, well, business is business, and I have my job, and then I have my family life. That line is not that clear when you're in a startup. And so make sure that you're taking time to communicate well with your spouse or significant other and those of your partners. Make sure, because that is a support mechanism that's going to be extremely, extremely, extremely important as you're trying to work 3 all-nighters in a row to be on the road 80, 90, 110% of the time. That support network is something that you absolutely have to make sure you've paid attention to and you have on board. So those are just a couple of the things where I have seen some companies, great ideas, great technology that failed to get out of the gate, that launched and was generating revenue and then failed. And so I think it's a phenomenal way of life to start a business, but my recommendation to you is pick the thing you're going to innovate in and focus on that. My last recommendation to you is this. Get out there and fail. Do it now. Get it done. So go fail.
Next up, we have Jeff Manber.
Thank you, Bruce. It's great to be back here. I come here every, I guess, like 4 or 5 years, see old friends, and recalibrate where I am in my career and where we are in the industry. I took Bruce's email and notes and decided to give 4 or 5 examples to you this morning of how space is unique than any other sector, and just draw on 4 or 5 projects I worked on. And in jotting it down, I came up with 4 ways that space is completely different than most other industries. And it's emotion, national security, political risk, and symbolism. And I'll go through each one that I've gone through. The first one is emotion. In 1989, I was working in the Reagan administration, and friends of mine, Anthony Arad and Byron Lichtenberg, came in and said, we've secretly negotiated a deal with the Soviets to use the brand new space station Mir, and we need your help to get this through the U.S. government. And the only problem, of course, in 1989 is there's no way that NASA's going to allow any commercial agreement between an American company and the Soviets to use Mir when they were trying to build freedom. And Payload Systems wanted to do a pharmaceutical project to grow crystals. And so we looked at the application, and what my great contribution to opening the door with Russia and commercialization and at that time was we had to put together the proposal. And the proposal should have said, this is an application to grow crystals on the Soviet space station Mir. But we know that in space, there is this emotionalism a lot of people feel from the Cold War. And so the application by Payload Systems said, this is an application to use a unique Soviet facility located 200 miles from Moscow. It's true. And it wasn't until page 5, roughly, that we said, oh, it's in space. And why does that make a difference? Why should it make a difference? But in our business, it does make a difference. And so if you went to DOD and you went to these folks and said, we want to use this unique laboratory, okay, that's understandable. We don't have the capability. It's an American company. They want to do something. There won't be any technology transfer. But when you say the word space, it changes everything. So the first, since this is war stories, the first thing I've learned is that space is uniquely emotional and different for Americans. It has there's a reservoir left over from Sputnik and Apollo and all that. And so lesson 1 I learned early on was the emotionalism involved. Lesson number 2, national security. Like it or not, there's a lot of national security involved in space. In 91, 92, I'm working for the chairman of Pan Am Sat. And many of you may or may not know Pan Am Sat, but they busted up the Intelsat monopoly. And many of you may not realize that in the 70s and 80s, when you went to Europe, you wanted to call home, you had to go into a booth. It was called a PTT booth. And it was because Intelsat was a government international monopoly. All the nations in the West belonged to it. And you couldn't, CNN didn't exist then because it would be too expensive. They had to go through Intelsat. And there was a Mexican-American businessman, Rene Anselmo, who said, wait a second, I want to have international communications on a satellite. I want to send soap operas from America to Mexico. This is business. And he wasn't allowed. So he bought an Ariane 4 launch where the last one had been unsuccessful. He bought the Peloponnese B satellite retrieved by Joe Allen from the shuttle that nobody wanted. It was $70 million. He didn't have enough money for insurance. And he launched that sucker, okay? And he didn't have permission to use it. He did not have permission to use it. Why not? National security. Intelsat at that time was a tool of the national, of our, how do you say it, our security interests. And we did not wish in America to give up control of international communications to a Mexican businessman who smoked 5 packs of Camels a day and had a quadruple bypass heart surgery, which was Rene Anselmo. And eventually, to my embarrassment, West Germany was first. They were the first one to give landing rights. Margaret Thatcher's Great Britain was second, and we in the George Bush the first were third. And the reason we were third was national security issues. So at that time is when it hit me. First, I went through Payload Systems and learned that, space is sometimes a bad thing if you say it and it brings up all these emotions. Then I go work for Pan Am Sat and find out that even though we in the United States should have been first to bust up the Intelsat monopoly, we were third because of national security issues. So you have to be aware. As you set out, make sure you don't touch that third rail, which is national security. Boy, those of you who know my background know what's coming next, and that's a political risk. I was foolish enough or brave enough to be CEO of Mir Corp. And we leased the Russian space station Mir. And on paper, it sure seems like a good idea for a private sector to lease a space station and sell it commercially. Well, it turns out that you could sell it commercially. We signed the first contract with Dennis Tito before he went to ISS. We signed with Mark Burnett to do a game show where the winner would go to space. And when the Mir was finally deorbited, we had over $170 million in backlog. So we proved the commercial side. And as you set out to do a business plan, And as I think Joe Carroll can easily say, I mean, we found out, sure, there's a lot of things we could do. The business plan all made sense, but we had a huge political risk. Oh yeah, the United States of America was opposed. Oh, hello. Gee, that's called political risk. And so when you set out to do a business plan in this business, one of the questions you have to ask is, does it fly in the face of international policy? Is this something that's wanted today by the nations, whether it be the United States or the ISS partners or the West or whomever? And that's trivial in many industries. In internet, software, political risk does not really come into play. Where it comes into play in oil and gas probably, and in space, because that's a very, very important part of realizing whether you're going to have commercial success. And the final example, just to bring it up to date, I don't know what to call this one. I call it symbolism. I'm head of a company now called NanoRacks, and we have a commercial laboratory, the only commercial laboratory on International Space Station. And we're working fine with NASA now, and a lot of the demons of the past are put to rest. But here's an example of something that happened that only could happen in space. We're putting up onto the ISS a sophisticated research device called a plate reader. And will allow the astronauts to do, on behalf of our commercial clients, sophisticated research and analyze compounds instead of having to bring it back down to Earth, which is difficult now. And even when SpaceX really gets going, comes down in the ocean. And so we want the ability to do on-orbit analysis, where there were people in the US government extremely concerned. Well, who are your customers going to be? Are there going to be any Chinese customers? Are there going to be any, who are going to be your customers? This plate reader is extremely sophisticated. I call the manufacturer of the plate reader, Molecular Devices. I say, how many countries buy your plate reader? It was something like 44. I say, are they located in China? Oh, sure, we have like 12 in China. So in other words, again, this goes back to the whole thing of space and how it's different. In other words, Chinese researchers, Chinese universities can buy a plate reader, put it up in the Beijing University. But if they want to use the one on the station, we cringe. And we're working it out with NASA. We're working it out. They've been real nice about it. But there's something special about space. All the things that make everyone in this room really dig space are also make other people nervous. And it's the national security, the emotionalism from the Cold War, the symbolism. It's all these things make, when you write your business plan, when you think about giving up the day job, when you're thinking about all these things, recognize that space is unique and it'll come up and bite you. And you just got to realize and be anticipated and work very carefully around the landmines. So, thank you.
So, Jess?
Well, I have no prepared remarks whatsoever. But let me tell you a little bit. I think I'm on my 3rd career or 7th career or 10th career, something like that right now. I spent 20 years in the Air Force. A large chunk of that is what I think a book was once written called Entrepreneuring as opposed to Entrepreneuring. We eventually, through the Strategic Defense Initiative, built and flew a small test vehicle down at White Sands called Delta Clipper Experimental, TCX, Vertical Takeoff and Landing Demonstrator. Sitting here almost 20 years later, I would never have believed in a million years, I was young and skinny and wore a blue suit back then, but would never in a million years have believed that somebody wouldn't have picked this up and run with it. Looking back, the government's done nothing with it. Although there's still interest and support in the government in working ways to get cheaper access to space. Another vehicle we flew was called the X-40A Approach and Landing Test Vehicle. Well, amazingly, that vehicle, in terms of X-37, is flying in orbit today, follow-on. So you never know. The obvious thing to go do a follow-on to DCX is what somebody should have done in the government, but they didn't. On the other hand, we now have 4 different commercial companies and probably a few more than that pushing vertical takeoff and landing. SpaceX, Blue Origin, Armadillo, and Masten Aerospace. So people listen even when you entrepreneur within the government. I then went off and did a tour with a company called Universal Space Lines under Pete Conrad, who was the Apollo 12 and Skylab commander. Working for Pete was unique because there was nothing that Pete couldn't do. Unfortunately, I learned the hard way that raising money is really, really hard in the entrepreneurial world. In the government, you can go out and talk to hundreds of people within the government to get approval to your program, and any one of those people can stop you. In the entrepreneurial world, it's just the opposite. All you need is one person who really wants to do it. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, etc. It's got to be somebody with money, though. Trying to raise money is tough in the entrepreneurial world. There's 4 areas that you need to address. The regulatory, the government can say no. The market's got to be there. The business risk, and the technical risk. And of those, the technical risk is generally assumed by the people who provide money that you've solved that. Otherwise, they're not going to give you money. So it's tough to get through all of those different barriers and put together a business plan. Now, I'm primarily talking launch. Some of the other kinds of concepts here, NanoRacks, et cetera, are things that you can get your arms around and you can go do. Launch is hard. Elon tried to fly and took a lot longer than he thought. Blue Origin tried to fly and taken longer than they thought. So everybody who gets into this launch business finds out that it's harder than it looks like. But at any rate, I had a great time out there working for Pete, and we did go out and successfully spun off a company called Universal Space Networks that provided TT&C tracking to the commercial sector, raised a fair amount of money for both launch and for that company. And I spent 3 years out there doing that, and then I went back to my comfort zone, which was back to the Air Force Research Laboratory, this time as a civilian. And I've spent my time there building up the program that we have today, which is a responsive and reusable boost technology. It's what we call a flagship program. And we're doing a number of things. We're building a large-scale, all-composite, linerless tanks and testing them down at Lockheed Martin, Michoud, 7-foot diameter, 19-foot long, would be 35-foot long, except we cut it off because we don't need the length, we didn't need the diameter. So it's big enough to scale up. 100% composite, very lightweight, linerless, common bulkhead tanks. We're going to test all that for LOX hydrocarbon applications. We'll put liquid nitrogen on the inside, and we will put heat lamps on the outside, and we'll cycle it through 100 missions. 100 missions, a reusable system, 100 missions. The also have a flight experiment called Pathfinder, which is supersonic/hypersonic, somewhere in there. And we'll be announcing those awards in the next month or so. We also have a number of software demonstrations, from responsive operability operations to integrated vehicle health management and adaptive guidance and control. So a lot of things that would benefit any commercial sector solutions in the future or any government program that happens. And then finally, we have on our propulsion side, upper stage engine technologies for LOX hydrogen engines in the future, expander cycles as well as other cycles. And we have a program called Hydrocarbon Boost, developing the technologies for a very highly operable, reusable, low-cost LOX hydrocarbon engine with a high thrust level, 250,000 pounds plus. So we're doing all that within the government. The technology is going to be there. And you know, it's depressing to see how little progress we make, but it's also exhilarating to see that that technology is going to be there in the future, and that many of the companies, which hopefully some of you in this room will start, will be able to pick up and chase, and eventually create a society that lives not just on this planet, but throughout our solar system. So entrepreneuring, they both have their rewards. I would encourage those of you who are so inclined to chase them and to push the boundaries of what's possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Tom, you want to come on up?
I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking about business models. Out of the 22, 23 companies I've been involved with over the last 33 years, the business model has been an important feature. And so I'm going to jump right in that we're going to go through these slides fairly quickly. Business models are kind of the rationale of how the organization creates and delivers real value, but it's real value to the ultimate customer. We've done a lot of work with NASA, but it's the places where we had success is where we actually delivered customer value to a customer of NASA at the station and on the shuttle. So it's the business model we're going to talk about. I'll try to highlight it in each of these view graphs. This is a SpaceHab module started in about 1983 by a couple investors. I was the first employee, and it was a commercial company that duplicated a NASA module that already existed. Bob Citron is a serial entrepreneur that came out of the government, and I learned just about everything I know about entrepreneurship from this gentleman. He's still out and working as an entrepreneur. Walter Kistler is a Swiss citizen, came over just after the war and used his money and his innovation to create many, many different companies around the world. Our business model there was to create, at the beginning of the space shuttle, a mid-deck locker that did more than just store toothpaste and extra clothing for the astronauts. There were a few battery-operated experiments in mid-deck lockers, but we wanted to suggest to the government that we would increase the number of mid-deck lockers on the space shuttle and thereby draw in microgravity researchers where they really didn't have a place to work yet. So we created a module, and we used a 2 cubic foot mid-deck locker, and we had no idea what we could charge. And NASA, when we went to visit them many times, about 200 meetings at NASA, the question we always got was, we already have a module, it's called Space Lab. We got it free from the Europeans, and people can use that as they wish. And so it took us a while to get over that. We began to raise money. We continued to talk to NASA. I moved the company from Washington, state of Washington, to Washington, D.C., right across from the old NASA building. We thought NASA people would come over for coffee. They never did. So we had to get more aggressive. We were out raising money and trying to build a business model that, with a module that, and sell to people who already had a module. And so we finally established the fact that we could actually build a thing. We could probably offer services that might be cheaper, but we had no idea how cheap they could be. And we kind of fell in with NASA Downey, with Rockwell International and Downey. And so we were at their plant about 8 months. They wanted to buy the company and buy the entire company and then give it back to us so we could own about 8% and do the marketing to the smaller experimenters. So we finally never could agree on a price, so they kicked us out of the plant, and we were kind of lost. We went to an old contractor that I'd worked with in Italy who had done the basic structure for the Space Lab module, and we got them to agree to build this new module you see on the screen. We built 2 of them, raised $105 million, and that module has flown about 12 times on the shuttle, generated $1 billion in revenue. We did, in fact, reduce the cost of doing a mid-deck locker and mid-deck locker research on the space shuttle by a factor of 10, which kind of embarrassed everybody, including ourselves. We didn't realize it would be that cheap. And it stimulated about 2,000 microgravity experimenters around the world to come to the SpaceHab module and do their research in preparation for going to station. So after 4 years with SpaceHab, I left we turned it over to people who were much better at managing aerospace hardware than I was, or than we were, and they had gone ahead and then got a what's called a CMAM contract from NASA for about $400 million, and that kind of made the company successful. They have flown Space Hab hardware on the shuttle 28 times, 12 times as a module, generated about $1 billion in revenue from both NASA and commercial sources. And now that the shuttle is not flying anymore, the Space Hab is really not worth very much. And so they've changed the company to a company that we bought called Astrotech, and they're doing just fine down at Kennedy. I became involved with the external tank of the space shuttle. I worked for the Michoud operation of Martin Marietta Aerospace for about 6 years, and all I got to do was think of wild ideas of how to use the tank in orbit. And actually, they liked one or two of the ideas. And so I got to help them create some of those. One of them was the aft cargo carrier, which would have doubled the payload volume of the space shuttle. This is an idea of how large the tank is in relation to people. We also have looked at it in a hotel context, and also split it apart for other operations in the orbital assembly. You could do a torus, spin at about 2 to 3 revolutions a minute, and create about 20% gravity inside the tanks. So there is a partial gravity activity as well. But all that went away once the shuttle went away, so the tank is no longer available to us. We did develop a space act agreement with NASA, and they were going to put 5 tanks in orbit for us for free. And we put down a cash deposit for that, but that's all gone away as well. Kistler Aerospace came along. Walter Kistler and Bob dreamed about a reusable vehicle, a 2-stage, and we raised about $860 million over a 12-year period, and that finally went bankrupt, and so we didn't get to do that. The Kistler vehicle is about 120 feet high, 2-stage. We got major contractors like Lockheed Martin, Aerojet, and Northrop Grumman to work with us. And some worked better than others. Some worked on cash. Some worked cash only. Others worked on credit. But we did get within about 80% of final design and fabrication before we ran out of money. The only thing we ever actually had to create at Kistler was the ring sail parachute, which is about 150 feet in diameter, and we actually needed that to bring our hardware back in and reuse it. And we could not find that kind of a parachute anywhere in the world, so we had to design and test that with Irvin Aerospace. It worked just fine. We were, of course, after reducing the cost of launching payloads to orbit, we felt we could launch them at about 38% of what a Delta II could launch, and we never got a chance to test that out, but we're still looking for ways of lower cost launch, because we see that as a major cost barrier for the starting of new companies, and there's about 20 industries in orbit waiting for a lower cost launch to begin their operations. We then took the Kistler model and created a logistics system for going to the moon. It was called Lunar Transportation Systems. Our business model was to carry unmanned cargo to the moon and then return the vehicle and replenish it at a propellant depot or in some other manner in low Earth orbit and do the trip again. So we started out as a payload and then ended up as a reusable vehicle in orbit. This was our payload going to orbit. And we then, after Kistler's demise, we decided we would go on an Atlas V or some of the other launch vehicles available. So we were completely scalable, able to really satisfy any diameter that we could get, and we were automated in our change out of propellant tanks, and we put together about 18 patents over a 3 or 4 year period. before we began to get a little nervous because the industry was not sure how they were going to handle the moon, and so we've kind of pulled back from that. So the business models varied. Some became wildly successful, like Spacehab, where the initial stock was for sale at 5 cents a share. Seems kind of low. It rose to a level when we started real operations to $15 a share. So that's 300 times the money. That's not 300%, but it's 300 times the original nickel. And so a lot of investors did very well with that, providing they sold at the right time. But it's the kind of venture that you kind of dream about that actually makes a great deal of money for the company that comes up with it. Thank you.
And last but not least, Max.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll do it from here, Oprah style. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk last day and a half, clearly, about this new frontier that we're entering, hopefully, this new public-private partnership paradigm. And that's great, because certainly, personally, I've been, since the very start of my time at SpaceX, on the front edge of that with the COTS. I wrote the COTS proposal for SpaceX. I managed the program for 4 years. And that, as we all know, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but that is a shining example of a well-conceived, well-executed program in an otherwise rather dreary background. So there's been a lot of talk about new procurement mechanisms. If you saw the commercial crew briefing last week and watched poor Ed Mango and Jet Brent wither under the, actually sat stoically under the withering onslaught from the usual suspects in commercial space. All about why not a Space Act agreement instead of the FAR. There's talk about payment milestones, performance milestones, and a lot of the good issues are being raised. It seems to me, though, that if we're going to enter this brave new world, there are a number of issues people are not talking about that are going to be equally important. And I wanted to just raise a few of them today. The first one, and this is both from my SpaceX experience and from my current experience with ISPS as a startup, we're marketing a very innovative monopropellant. I think it's going to be a very successful product. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left SpaceX to do this. IP, intellectual property. It's been talked about a little bit, but nowhere near enough. There's a big elephant in the room here that needs to be dealt with before we can move into this brave new world. As a small business, beware. Be prepared to read the small print. Be prepared to push back on NASA lawyers, even when they say there's no wiggle room and they take forever to say it. And be prepared to walk away. Exhibit 1. About 3 months ago, my partner Greg Mungus at Firestar and a few of the people with him who invented the NOFBX monopropellant received a very nice email from NASA saying they'd been selected to receive a NASA Tech Brief Award. And sign on the dotted line and you'll get your check for $350. Now, we took the time to read the fine print and found that by signing on that line, we were ascribing to NASA unlimited global rights to license this technology, basically to use this technology. And at the time, you know, the company, the new company wasn't solvent, and $350 buys a lot of beer. So we thought about this for 10 microseconds and then sent an email back saying, we are taking active steps to commercialize this technology into a multi-$100 million a year market. You can take your check. And no, we were nice about it, but thank you, but no thank you, we'll decline this award. A week later, they come back to us and say, you know what, you didn't really have to sign on the line at all, just come and receive this award. Makes you glad that you didn't just, you didn't even need to do that to get the $150. All right, Exhibit 2. ISPS, this propulsion company, wrote a proposal late last year and was awarded under the National Lab Program a flight opportunity to the International Space Station next year. We received notice that we'd won it in January of this year. We got the formal letter early February. We signed a contract in June on a 20-month deliverable for flight. Those 5 months were spent negotiating the contract, and guess what the sticking point was? IP. We went in saying, this is our biggest concern, even before the award. They said, it's going to be fine, we understand, don't worry about it. Well, it was a big issue. And 4 months into the 5-month process, the person we were negotiating with at JSC actually sent us an email with the latest edits to the contract saying, this is it, no more negotiation, take it or leave it. And it took some phone calls and a reaming from NASA headquarters to get the negotiation moving again. And I should say, we had support from the highest levels of the National Lab Program and from the ISS program. And still, this is going on. And in the end, what we did, and this is very interesting, all the FARs contemplate either complete ownership of IP by NASA or joint ownership. Joint ownership of IP with the government is like having 2 deeds on your house. It really makes the asset worthless. We are going out to investors and raising money. And the first thing they want to know is, where's the IP and who owns it? And you say, we do. Oh, and the US government. It takes the value of the IP as a small company and completely deflates it to the point where it almost destroys the value of the IP, to know that the government could almost arbitrarily at any time decide that you can't meet their supply requirements, and so they're going to give it to somebody else who can. So this is a lesson hard learned, but what we ended up doing, and we came up with this, not the NASA lawyers, we ended up pushing the SBIR Phase 3 language into our cooperative agreement. SBIR is a godsend for small companies. It's not under the FAR, it's not a Space Act agreement, it's congressionally mandated program, congressionally funded, and it's congressionally mandated IP language. And what it does is it gives you, as long as you take steps to commercialize the technology, it gives you exclusive rights to it. If for 5 years you do nothing with the technology, then it reverts to joint ownership, basically, with the government. Fair enough. So we came up with this, we pushed it, we forced it into this contract, because we were ready to walk away. But in the end, we got a cooperative agreement with this language. So I just want to say, small business beware. There's another aspect to this IP concern, and that is practices within NASA. I know that at JPL, I had constant training in IT security, in ethics. It always seemed like I was delinquent on some training program. But they're nothing about IP. And I could tell you a list of horror stories about NASA personnel and other agencies, but mainly I'll focus on NASA personnel, either through negligence or, I think, in some ways, really, they should have known better, gross negligence, sharing our IP, either SpaceX IP or our current ISPS IP, where it shouldn't be shared. It ends up in the hands of competitors or in public domain. So whatever they're doing needs to be changed in practice as well, even once the language in the contracts is different. The other two, I think I have like 2 or 3 more minutes. The other 2 points are shorter. I think there's been talk about government stimulating commercial markets. I think there is a very fine line between stimulating and subverting. And this is a messy topic. And actually, SpaceHab, I think I have good friends at SpaceHab who worked for SpaceHab who still have deep scars along these lines. Was a great example. And Dragon Lab that I pushed as a free-flying platform when I was at SpaceX is exactly analogous. If the government's going to buy a chunk of payload and then you try to market the rest, the government can't start handing it out to people who would otherwise be paying customers. And this kind of killed SpaceHab to a large extent. They pay with half their module in exchange for the ride, but want to market the rest commercially. Well, if NASA starts handing this out, who's going to buy it commercially? And there are people who think to stimulate the market, the government should buy this. Well, if they're going to give it out to government-funded research, that's one thing. If they're going to give it out for STEM, that's one thing. If they're going to give it out to people who could otherwise pay, then that subverts a market indefinitely. And the third point is really kind of a feel-good point. Is talk about bureaucratic process, and I know the FAA and the NTIA and the launch ranges and environmental EPA. I know it's onerous, it's a lot of overhead, it takes a long time and seems kind of pointless, but the important thing going into that, you have to believe it's all about relationships and trust. The process, the forms, the meetings, that's all just stuff that we talk about while you're getting to know each other. And that's really important, because when push comes to shove on launch day, people have to make smart, informed decisions, and they have to trust each other. And that happens if you effectively go through this process. It cannot really happen any other way. So I got a great story about a turtle fence, but I'm kind of out of time unless you want me to tell a story about a turtle fence. It's up to you.
Why don't we kind of save that to the end? So I guess that, some moderator's privilege here. So if you had to kind of point out to, what's the one big, do-over you'd like to have, the one big thing that you'd like to be able to go back and take a different path or choose a different thing that you think would make a big difference. Do you guys have any of those that you'd like to do a do-over? A mulligan?
Start sooner.
Okay.
I had a great career before I became an entrepreneur and crossed over. I was an intrapreneur. I wish I would have started sooner, and before I had a mortgage and that kind of stuff.
Anybody else have a do-over that they'd like to do, a different path that they wish they'd taken?
Can I raise a different point if no one does?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to follow through, because I really enjoyed Max's comments there, because, and I was discussing it with someone earlier, because we've reached a point in the industry where 10 years ago, we all applauded, 15 years ago, those rare moments when NASA supported a commercial venture. And 10, 15 years ago, they could support a space hab. And Max just raised an issue which is a lot of concern to NanoRacks, and I know to others. If NASA uses traditional, and the government, traditional means to support one company, are they harming the ecosystem that's emerging? And it's really wonderful now. We have an ecosystem emerging. We have a commercial infrastructure because of many of the people in this room, organizations. And so now it's a far more subtle question. How do you support a SpaceX and not hurt a Masten and a NanoRacks? You have to take them all into account. And so I think that the lessons that we have come away with here, a lot of them no longer apply. And now there's a question, I mean, they do apply, but today we have a completely different environment where government support has to take into account the whole infrastructure. So I just want to say that.
Jess?
Yeah, I've got two of them. One, when I graduated from college in 1978, why in the hell didn't I go up and work for Microsoft Bill Gates,
Then you could have bought your own rocket, right?
Number two, and I'm torn on this one, I sure wish that on DCX, when we flew it, we had maintained the ability to shut the engines off and turn them back on. We would have gone supersonic, demonstrated a lot more. But I tell you, we were on the ragged edge of being insolvent every step of the way. And trust me, government programs can go insolvent just as fast as commercial ones, even faster, because it can be done on a whim. But at any rate, that's one thing I always wished we had figured out how to do.
I think the comment about patents, I need to maybe reinforce a bit. When you look at patents in general, about 1 out of 10 patents does the company actually some good along the way. But about 1 out of 100 patents actually saves the company from disaster. And we were, I guess, fortunate enough at Spacehab to have that disaster early on in our career. So we just kind of put in a patent that actually saved us from being overrun by Rockwell. And we survived that, and also the first shuttle accident happened when we were in Torino putting together the contract for the 2 modules we were hiring them to build for us. And we didn't know how to react to that disaster. And the second shuttle loss was, of course, a double module for SpaceAb. So we didn't know how to react to that either. But the patents, as a small company, you need that kind of protection. And it's not terribly expensive. Once you do a few patents, you can learn how to do it yourself. And a provisional patent, which gives you 1 year of protection, and you're able to go out and talk to people and say, I have a patent pending. That is a less than a $200 investment. And it's something you can do yourself. So you young entrepreneurs out there and have ideas and you feel you can't talk to people about them, for $200 you can protect that for at least a year. If it turns out to be a good idea and an idea that you can sell and make money with, you can then put in a utility patent, and that'll give you 20 years protection from just about anybody
Tom, did
overrunning you.
Tom, did you have, did SpaceAb have insurance on the Columbia? Because that's another topic we could discuss, is the importance of risk mitigation.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you did on the...
company had a 25-year history. They're still in
Right.
business.
Yeah.
I stayed there 4 years, and that was longer than the two investors stayed. So most of what SpaceAb had as a success was after I left and started a new company.
Yeah, because the whole question...
So the insurance was not well handled.
Yeah.
The people who were in charge actually thought they could get away with a lower premium, and that was not a good thing.
Because that's something else in our business that's often overlooked because it's not sexy at all, but risk mitigation. And risk mitigation and the folks working mostly in London, Lloyd's and stuff, they're brilliant and they know what they're doing. And you really need, if you know, don't be, I don't want to use the word greedy, but if your profits are, 48%, give up 10% and take some risk mitigation.
So we got a question from cyberspace here. The question is, what would you say are your best, quote, in quotes, weapons suites or strategies in the war of commercial space ventures? Are they your business knowledge, background, law knowledge, and background, assembly of your team or army or whatever? So, what's your main weapon there? Is it your idea, your team, your IP, what?
I'll start with a few thoughts, but being in the right place at the right time, there's really no substitute for that. You get lucky and you get unlucky, but being in the right place, starting at the right time into a market that's growing or you think can grow, and with innovation that allows you to capture at least some value and turn that value back to the customers that you're going to amass.
People. Get the right team, you can make anything happen. But you also got to be realistic, be in the right place, be in the right time, and be realistic about what you can do.
So let me follow up on that. One of the things that, people say is you got to keep your focus, you got to do that. But the other part of this is you got to be kind of flexible of how you get there. So you guys want to talk about how do you do that? How do you keep the long-term focus, but keep the short-term flexibility that matches the realities of the situation, that sometimes you come up with the dog food that the dogs don't want to eat, so you have to go over and find another way to do it to get where you want to go. So how do you balance those two things?
You have to remember that space is a business. And a lot of the folks in this room and a lot of us have the dream and we're in space because we love it. But it's a business. And for me at NanoRacks, this is a business. And we go where the market tells us to go. And you look at, let's say, years ago, Orbital Sciences. They started out doing upper stage of Mars something, and it didn't go right, and they ended up in another direction, and an outside person came in and gave them Pegasus. And in other words, they followed the market. And so if there's one piece of advice I can give and how to be successful is your dreams are wonderful. Dreams of going to asteroid mining or Mars or the moon. But when you take money from others, especially, and the NanoRacks we just completed a round of financing, I have to say, hey, this is our dream to have a commercial lab on station. But look, if the market takes us somewhere else, you go somewhere else. And so to be successful, you have to treat this like any other business in any other market sector, and it may be that Masten or SpaceX goes in another direction because that's where the market goes. And so you just have to keep your eye on this is a business, and if I want to have a dream, I use my own money.
For Masten, we have that vision of where we're heading, but to continue the military analogy, no plan survives first contact with a customer. So it's great that we think we know what everyone wants, and I guess it should have been written in bigger letters on here. For any entrepreneur, sell, go out there and sell, go out there, talk to your customers. I had an early experience with the team. We had some visitors out, very intelligent, PhD level scientists. We're giving them a tour, and I'm trying to show them the rocket, and they're crawling around on the ground. And I was confused. But these were guys that were interested in what happens to the ground when you land. We just kind of pave it over and fire again. But there was a value there, and so we've been able, by being sensitive to that and pay attention to it, hey, there's something that we're doing that someone has interest in, so and it's an additional line. We're still focused on reaching our goals, but if there's extra benefit, if there's things we can do for you, for anyone else, let us know.
Okay.
I think, just to follow on from what Jeff just said, a lot of us are in space because we're passionate about it. We have this deep kind of fascination with anything to do with space. And that's fine, that's great, it's good to be passionate about what the area you're forming a business in, but ultimately you have to treat it as a business. And so just check your passions at the door when you go to work, and do what the investors are going to want you to do, which is manage the business well, protect your IP, hire the best people, and run it like a business, and don't expect any special graces, and don't expect to get funded by the government. If you need to, walk away from the government and take commercial, because it really cleans everything up. But if you can sell to government on your own terms as a commercial commodity, then great. But there's not many cases where the government is ready to buy on those terms these days.
So we seem to be spending a lot of time talking about money, so let's talk about money for a minute. And one of the things is there's been a lot of cases there of now, the venture capital community seems to be at least, starting to pay attention. We've been doing this series of space investment summits to try to help that along. I guess the question here is the difference between angel investors and the super angels and the straight VCs. So I guess the question is how do you land an angel or a super angel, do you think that the standard venture, do I go to space or do I build a shopping mall kind of VCs are ready to get into this game?
Well, in the early days with Space Hub, we couldn't find a venture capitalist that would listen. They didn't know enough about space. They had to hire experts to look at any business plan. At Kistler, we had teams of technical people that would come and look at our hardware and look at our business plans. And those teams were hired by the people who had real money, that were going to put real money into the concept. And so it's evolved over time to VCs and other financial people.
Can you talk about where the $860 million came from?
It came from all sizes. There are, of course, 5 or 6 levels of investment, and we touched them all, including some venture capitalists, although venture capitalists can't wait more than about 3 years to get 10 times their money. So we never got that good at returning money to people. And at Kistler, we never returned any. And we owing space companies some money as well. So they all went broke together. But at Space Hub, we even had trouble with venture capitalists, and that was in the 80s, mid-80s. The money comes sometimes from overseas, but you have to maintain a Department of Defense 51% of ownership, and there's a number of other little rules you have to keep in mind. But it would come more from institutional investors when you go past the big 5, friends and family, all the way up to you know, to the more sophisticated investors. It's those large investors who have confidence in what you're going to do that are really the place for the real money.
Jeff?
We just finished the NanoRacks, our first outside investment round. And the good news is boutiques are springing up. We worked with Near Earth, Hoyt Davidson, who was one of the judges earlier this morning on the business plan. His firm assisted us, and we had to convince normal people, they weren't VCs, that space or NanoRacks was a viable venture. They didn't give a hoot about space. And they went into NanoRacks because they ticked off all the boxes. We have a stable government policy on low Earth orbit, believe it or not, all of us fighting commercial crew and all this sort of issue, but on space station, it's there. It's a bipartisan issue. There's no politics involved in that. And then the other major thing was we had a customer manifest, and we had proved in the marketplace. And I was struck by some of the business plans this morning, you know, saying when we get a customer, when we, you know, I don't think we could have raised the money except for the fact that we had a customer manifest and people were paying us money. And so on the basis of the fact that it was stable government policy, the station is up there to 2020 and beyond. There's no political issues. There's a customer manifest in place. In our case, there's no IP issues. NASA's not fighting us. We had to turn to a Near Earth and other angel networks around the country that did the round of financing. So that's very encouraging news. And if we do well, then those investors, there were 10 investors, they'll go out and tell their friends, and it spreads, and it'll make it easier for you guys when you come along.
Yeah. Another exemplary company here is Skybox in this area, actually, who are doing commercial constellation. And they like to say, Dan Birkenstock there has raised money on the open market, and he boasts about how he did that without talking about space. He did it by not talking about space. He talked about the service they can provide, the capability, the demand. Oh, and by the way, we're going to build and operate a network of spacecraft. Because investors hear the word space and they get nervous, and a nervous investor is as good as none. They've got portfolio of stuff coming across their desk every day, and they don't want to choose something that looks risky. And space just seems risky. And fundamentally, we talk about commercial space, but I'd like to make the point that commercial space doesn't currently exist. Some maybe on the edge exceptions here, but the big commercial space companies that get held up as the poster childs, like the Blue Origins and the Armadillos and the SpaceXs, these were started by people who made their money in a completely different industry and made enough of it that they could afford to have this pet project running and weather the drawbacks that inevitably happen. You don't really, I wouldn't really consider this commercial space until venture capital can get a 5 to 10-fold return on investment in a 3 to 5 year period. And once someone does that, and no one's done that yet, once someone does that, then yes, there'll be a rush of investors to invest in this just like they do in every other sector of the economy. That'll tell you that the space economy has made it. It's now a functional, contributing part of our capitalist economy.
One thing very quickly, going along with Max said, we met with an angel network in Austin, Texas, Central Texas Angel Network, and they liked NanoRacks, but they had no person who had invested in a space project, so that they could not have a template. And finally, we had to get around. It took forever because they really liked the idea, but because there was no template, there was no expert, there was nothing, they had to grind to a halt. And same in New York, you need that success before others will follow.
So on that note, please help me thank the panel. Gary?
Thank you, everyone. That was phenomenal. A few quick announcements for what's going on